you've got a bit of a glad bag of different topics tonight. A bit of a mishmash, a bit of a potpourri of topics. Sure. I thought you weren't catching the meaning, so I was trying to phrase it in another term. I was running out of analogies, you know. And so a few different things, and I'm open to talk about anything, including some of the things you raised there, Nick. One of the things that Nick didn't mention is that the Prime Minister announced today that there will be an inquiry into establishing a big, serious generator in North Queensland for big, serious energy needs, which sounds to me like a dog whistle to the Nationals. So I think that prospect is still well and truly alive in my view. But happy to talk about that. Specifically, I'm going to talk in this presentation about four things. Just give a bit of a policy update, given the New South Wales situation. A bit of an economic update. Last time I was here, I talked about the economics of renewables and the cost curve trajectory. There have been some developments in that, so I'd like to update you on those. I'd then like to talk about what we need to do in the face of a climate emergency in terms of an accelerated response. So I'll do that, and then I'll touch on the conference which is happening next Tuesday and Wednesday. So to kick off, just I suppose a snapshot, where is New South Wales today? Well, New South Wales is a national laggard when it comes to renewable penetration and projects and support and frameworks. On a per capita basis, about 18% of households in New South Wales have solar PV on their rooftops. That compares to the national leaders, which are Queensland and South Australia, both sitting at more than 32%, respectively, of houses in those states with solar on their rooftops. So there's actually a lot of work to be done in the small-scale solar area. But there's also a lot of work to be done in large-scale solar, wind, energy storage projects. So all states and territories have targets of at least 50% renewables by 2030, except for two notable exceptions, Western Australia and New South Wales. So that's the scorecard, that's where we're headed into the election. As we know, the government's been returned. So let's have a look in detail at what they promised and what the agenda is that they're putting forward. Probably the centrepiece policy is for them to take to market interest-free loans for batteries and or batteries plus solar. The interest-free loans will be for a period of 10 years, up to 10 years, and will be available for 300,000 homes in New South Wales. So the interest-free amount for battery up to $9,000 and up to $14,000 for solar plus batteries. This is a good initiative, and we're looking forward to working closely with the New South Wales government to provide expert advice about how you get the best outcomes for consumers and for the state, for the environment and for householders. So we've had experience in these programs in other states and territories, and we're very much looking forward to sharing that knowledge and advice with the New South Wales, with the returned New South Wales government. Secondly, there's been a change in strata planning laws. Previously, it required a vote of 75% of unit holders to approve a solar installation. Those laws will be changed, and it will now only require 50%. Is that right? We have a genuine expert on this topic.
No, it's never been 75%.
Okay. Are you able to shed some more light on that then? So what they're seeking to do there?
Any change to common property requires a special resolution, and that is normally of the people who attend the meeting at full quorum, the vote counts for that. So it's not 75% of all voters, it's actually not 25%. But let's say 75%. So it's not it's never been 75% of all voters. It's been
who turns up?
75% of who forms a quorum and is entitled to vote. So you can have a block with 100 owners, and if you get a vote for all 40.
Got it. Okay, understand.
So that's
it's nicely stackable, but it doesn't even happen with the stack.
And quite frankly, it's not one of the barriers.
Right.
It's occasionally a barrier, but it's not a barrier. So the government doesn't know what they're doing.
Okay.
know exactly what they're doing.
That's our Strata Communities program. There's $20 million for their emerging energy program, and this is really about attracting private sector investment into large-scale developments in New South Wales. So that's the next thing. And then finally, they've committed $10 million for a solar and battery recycling fund. So as units come to the end of life, 10, 15, 20 years, then there's an appropriate recycling process for that. So they're the policies that have been put up. That's what's going forward. So
John, okay, would you rather wait for questions or can we throw in questions?
throw it in. Yeah.
This is I'm going to need pure self-interest at work here. How long do you think before they, I think it's 108, there's an income cap on the,
It is
$180,000.
It is, yeah.
What is your best guess at how long they will take to turn the go switch on that first initiative?
We haven't seen them in a great hurry in the past around these programs, but I'd want to think that they'd be able to figure it out between now and say the 1st of January 2020. So let's see how they go. And that's what I can. Now I said before that there's been a couple of developments in terms of economics around projects. And probably most notably, they've been around actually projects that were announced by Snowy Hydro. So Snowy Hydro obviously have their big battery, right? Their big pumped hydro storage, but they feed it with energy. And actually the cheapest energy they can buy now is from commissioned solar and wind farms. So they recently went to market. In October last year, they announced the results. There were 8 projects totaling 888 megawatts of capacity, solar and wind. And the average price across all of those projects was $44 per megawatt hour. Right? That was the contract price for new build, 888 megawatts, right? $44 per megawatt hour. Now, the comparison here is that the fuel cost for a coal-fired power station varies, price fluctuates, but I'm told is somewhere around $56 per megawatt hour for the cost of coal alone, right? So it does start to make this a bit of a compelling case. Now what Snowy Hydro does with this is they take the energy and then they firm it up by having their big pumped hydro solution. And they then in turn are able to sell that energy to the market, including the cost of the storage, right? So it's dispatchable, you know, whenever you need energy, right? It doesn't not linked to the weather or daytime or nighttime. It's available all the time. And they currently have contracts, they do long-term contracts, 15-year contracts at $70 per megawatt hour, with the cost of the renewables firmed up by their own assets sold into the market.
They've paid off Unit 3, so there's no capital cost involved in this. So that's the efficiency loss, is the 30% that they lose from pumping up the oil and draining it back down. So they can do that at $7 a megawatt hour, but it's not the same as firming up with
New build.
CO2.
I understand, or new build, yeah, I understand. And they are forecasting that that cost will come down over time, presumably as other capital is fully depreciated and amortised or whatever they do in accounting. What that means, some of the things just is that solar is now actually going everywhere, you know, and although we don't see some of these initiatives in Australia, they're actually really big around the world. So on water, solar is actually huge. There's lots of places that don't have the land availability that Australia does, and so on water PV is a big trend globally. We're seeing things like solar car parks, and these are actually coming up in Queensland and North Queensland. Hotter climates in Australia are very popular. Glass houses and greenhouses, so actually growing vegetables and other things inside glass houses, and we're seeing this again in Europe. It's just absolutely the norm. So too is the big solar farms where you have the solar arrays and then you have goats or onions or something growing or productive land at the bottom, right? Actually keeping the weeds down as much as anything. Another innovation is this flexible solar. It's interesting, Zheng Rongxi, the founder of Suntech, who was at UNSW. So he's come back and his new venture is in flexible solar. And these flexible solar panels are actually very flexible. They have a certain tolerance. You can't flex them too far, otherwise the cells will crack. But they have quite a wide range. But the big advantage is you can get a standard solar panel, a large scale one for commercial use. It's about 20 kilograms. It's really heavy. Whereas these flexible ones, for the same area, same percentage volume output of energy, sit at about 3.5 kilograms. So that's a massive difference. So in a lot of applications, they're actually just gluing them to the roof, right, rather than putting framing and other things in, which is really interesting in terms of the applications for that. So a structure like this, it's just a dinky little lightweight structure, but it can have solar on top because all of a sudden you don't have that same weight loading. Now I'm told there are still considerations for wind loading because you still have the same area that you've got to control. So it's probably not in every application or every zone, but nevertheless still an interesting application. This one here is about, well, they tell me is about 15% cheaper. The models that I've seen actually have a coating over the top which has little pyramids basically, and it's for orientation. So you can put them into any orientation and it optimises how it captures the light. So I'm intrigued, I want to learn more, I'd like to see some in the field, but it's an interesting development, that I hadn't sort of seen before.
I hope they don't do too much good in terms of recycling things.
Trying to pull them off.
Yes.
Yeah.
There must be tens and hundreds of thousands of those greenhouses in China.
Extraordinary.
And China's commitment to renewables is stunning. So.
Is unbelievable. I've been to China on a 4-day trip and have personally seen 1 million evacuated tube hot water systems in the time that I was in China. Just extraordinary. So this technology, kind of the printable technology, not as efficient as the silicon-based technology, but nevertheless interesting in terms of applications for disaster relief and that sort of thing. So another addition. At the more cutting edge, now we're starting to see some things like the nexus between solar and hydrogen. So this is one of our corporate members, Fronius, have actually got a hydrogen production plant fed off solar in Germany that's then producing hydrogen for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So that's kind of the new edge, and renewable hydrogen is definitely a big area of interest and focus, and I think it's very exciting for Australia. Please come in. So.
We're in Timber Creek in the Northern Territory. Timber Creek's a pretty small community. I think about 300 people live here. It's fairly remote. It's 3 hours from Katherine, so all of its supplies come in by road, by trucks that burn a lot of diesel. That's also how they get their electricity. A series of diesel gensets, which are just right next to us here. We're 5B and we're deploying a Maverick solar array. Today we're deploying 14 of our MAVs, which is a modular unit of our Maverick technology. Total is just under 200 kilowatts. This solar farm's basically plugging into the diesel generator here and helping power the town. Once it's operational, the solar will contribute roughly 15 to 20% of the town's energy, which means that over a year they're burning 15 to 20% less gigalitres of diesel. So the primary benefit of a solar installation like this is environmental. However, the cost benefits to power and water are, in this case, very large. Diesel is a very expensive form of electricity generation, and that's made it more expensive when you're in a remote town and diesel has to be trucked in from thousands of kilometres away. We've got the world's first cost-competitive modular redeployable solar array. It's deployed on site in a matter of sort of 10 to 15 minutes, which you can see happening behind me. in driving the costs down to a kind of new low for solar power, we're hoping to expand the reach of solar into new markets that where previously renewable energy was considered too expensive. I would be astonished if in 5 years' time they're still burning as much diesel here. It will make much more sense to be expanding the solar generation and storing energy in batteries.
So I wanted to show you that because there is innovation actually attacking the cost curve at every level. So this is a really smart engineering company based 3 kilometres down the road or 5 kilometres down the road that have really innovated in terms of how you roll out large-scale solar quickly and efficiently. So they turn out at a paddock that's kind of flat but also not kind of flat, and they basically have these systems where they basically unhook it and unfurl, right? So your deployment time and cost, particularly in places where you can't get a workforce to put in all of the infrastructure and that you need for a traditional large-scale solar farm. So innovation is happening at every point of the market. I don't know if you're aware of this project in South Australia. This is Sundrop Farms. So they've gone to Port Augusta. If you know Port Augusta is where the desert meets the sea, right? There is no water in Port Augusta. And they're actually growing, I think, the Australia's largest tomato farm, right? They actually supply Coles nationally, right? And what they're doing is they're taking seawater, desalinating it by using concentrated solar thermal technology, so the heat of the sun, and then actually running that water through then to create an oasis, if you like, in the desert. Real project, been operational for years, and really fantastic novel use of solar energy in terms of an application, and in South Australia. You would have seen a couple of years ago, between mid-2015 and 2016, the solar plane flew around the world. Now, when I was researching this, they were saying that the plane could basically stay up indefinitely because it had the solar connectors, it had sufficient batteries, and it could get above the clouds that it could essentially stay up indefinitely, but the pylons couldn't. So they had to, keep coming down. Look, it didn't go very fast. It was about 120 kilometres an hour or something, so it was a slow trip around the world, but nevertheless, 100% powered by the sun, so an interesting. Of course, the next innovation will be to take that hydrogen that's 100% produced by the sun and go around the world in 3.5 seconds, whatever it is that Elon Musk might do in one of his spaceships, I don't know. This is another innovation, if you haven't seen it. These are the solar hot water diverters. So solar PV is now so cheap that actually it is economic to just put more solar on, and instead of putting a solar hot water system in, have one of these systems on your system. So this detects if you're producing excess solar and you're not using it, and there's no other load inside the house, what it does is it diverts that load to a standard electric hot water system, right, with a resistance element in the bottom, and it just basically uses the sun, the excess solar energy, to heat your hot water, as opposed to not using it or spilling it out into the grid, where sometimes people aren't being paid very much as a feed-in tariff. So offsetting. So this technology now, for many people, makes economic sense. It's cheaper than getting solar hot water, and it's a new innovation. So I think it's actually a trend in terms of electrifying the house, electrifying everything in the house and in the business, right? And then powering all of those things that used to be powered by gas or by thermal processes, actually powering them with solar and other renewables. So a really interesting trend. I just wanted to illustrate this. I do get up into China 2 or 3 times every year. There's a great little startup company there, Alpha ESS, that does energy storage systems. And I went to Alpha one year, and this was their module battery that goes into their home energy system. And this unit here is 2.5 kilowatt hours. And I went back the next year, and they'd upgraded their lithium-ion battery pack. And so this one here is actually 7.5 kilowatt hours. That was the magnitude of difference in a 12-month period, sort of from walking the factory floor. So that's the sort of innovation that's happening with energy storage. The year began, or the summer began, right, 1st of December, with the rainforests of North Queensland on fire. That's significant because one of the distinguishing descriptions of a rainforest is it cannot burn. Right? That's how you classify a rainforest. Right? For the record temperature in Cairns up until November temperature record was 37.2 degrees. At the end of November, 26th of November, it was 42.6 degrees. So it didn't just break the record, smash the record out of the park. And then I sat back and watched a rolling cascade of climate catastrophes roll across the entire continent for the whole of the summer period. I watched 400,000 hectares of virgin forest in Tasmania burn. We saw the massive storms that hit Townsville and flooded out thousands of homes. We saw snow. We saw, weather extremes that are in no doubt exacerbated by the rate of climate change. And so I think it is high time that we call a climate emergency. We call this for what it is. In the ACT, the Climate Change Minister reported on our recent webinar that the temperatures recorded over summer in the ACT were 6 degrees above the long-term average. 6 degrees. Now, ACT is a small jurisdiction, right? But even in southeast Australia, it was about 2.3 degrees above the long-term average, and we just smashed records out of the park the whole summer long. In my view, an accelerated climate threat demands an accelerated transition plan, actually an action plan. It's not good enough to say, we know this is happening. We actually have to respond to it in some way. And so the work that I really want to focus on, the thing that I'm really focused on at the moment, is working with the energy physicists and the energy economists to figure out if we get really fair dinkum about an accelerated decade of transition, so that by 2030 or 2035, we've effectively eliminated carbon from the energy sector in Australia, right? What do we need to do to make that happen? What are the key milestones? What's the grid infrastructure that needs to be put in place? What are the other enabling technologies? When do they need to be done? Now, none of this is new. We actually know, collectively, we know what needs to be done, right? But we actually need to synthesise it into a 10-point plan that then we can present to government. And who knows, we might have a federal Labor government, and let's put some pressure on them to actually to do more, because the big step they took a few years ago where we pushed them very hard to adopt 50% renewables by 2030, now looks like it's going to be delivered as business as usual, right? They're not going to actually have to do too much to deliver 50% by 2030, but the climate emergency demands that we take greater action. It also demands that if Australia is going to be an influential global player, we have to fix our own backyard first. Today we're the pariah of the world. Well, we need to become a global leader before we can exert influence as a middle power on other nations. So I'm excited about this project. I want to engage all of our experts and brain trusts in it and get your help to help disseminate this, because this is something the public needs to get behind and governments need to get behind.
That include the hydrogen economy, because to me that's the key to become a hydrogen superpower. We transition to shipping fossil fuel, shipping hydrogen from
in my view, first we've got to actually transition a lot of those industrial processes that are currently based on gas or on heat to make them electrical processes. So we need to not just transition the existing load, but it needs to be an expanded load. We need to transition our transport fleet to be electric as quickly as possible, right? So we can power that through renewables. And I absolutely agree with you. There's a huge economic opportunity for Australia to remain as a global energy exporter, an exporter of renewable hydrogen, for example, and that's the sort of vision that I think we need. I think what we need on this, ladies and gentlemen, is leadership. We need some leadership, and we need to have a simple plan which everyone can swing in behind, that is credible, right? And then we just need to get to work and bash them over the head until they do it. So that's the next project that I'm very eager to embrace. A price on carbon would be helpful, wouldn't it?
For example, is the difference between if Sydney had decided on electric trolleybuses compared to the capital cost of putting in light rail. And trolleybuses are now being made in South Australia by the top Australian Muscat, and they're testing them there. So they're much more efficient than light rail, going up hills and going down, and they're much more flexible. But you don't have to have people walking into the middle of the road to get onto a train.
And you know, the work that people like Beyond Zero Emissions have done over the last decade to actually come up with the plans. We know what needs to be done. We need to synthesise it, and then we need to bloody well go and do it. So
It's a pity Jacinda Ardern is so busy at the moment.
yes. If you're interested in all the innovations, in the new products, in the new technology, in the policy thinking, then I can but highly recommend the conference to you. So there are probably 4 reasons why you'd want to come to the conference: Tuesday and Wednesday at the International Convention Centre at Darling Harbour in Sydney here. So the first is 120 expert speakers in 3 concurrent streams. So you really can pick the eyes out of the program and find some fantastic presentations to come and enjoy. 2, fantastic networking. Great opportunity if you're a young person and you're looking for, you know, employment opportunities, for internships. If you're a supplier, you're looking for customers, or if you're a potential project developer, you're looking for suppliers, finances. The latest products are on display, and really good market intelligence. I'd recommend that you download our app on your phone. It's SEConf 2019, SEConf 2019. It's got all the speakers listed, all the exhibitors listed, floor plans, everything you need. Download it now, spend some time over the weekend just kind of picking the eyes out of it, but you'll be much better prepared when you actually turn up on the day. So SEConf 2019, either Android or iOS. So 120 expert speakers. For us, the commercial success of this is that we get thousands of people in through the door. So anything you can do to come along, to bring people with you, to spread the word, that really helps us, and it increases the value proposition then to the people who paid the bill. But obviously for all of us, it's completely free to attend. So please mark it in your diaries and come along. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
What would you feel about the comment of rather than 300,000 interest-free loans to householders, 300,000 interest-free loans to those households?
Yeah, interesting. So I think that politicians in Australia have really focused on voters, actually, with everything that they've done. Well, that's right. And so optimising it hasn't been really thought through. I think in some cases, and that's why you had overly generous feed-in tariff schemes, for example, that were not sustainable. But at the same time, if mums and dads, if householders, if small businesses make a personal investment in energy infrastructure, well, just as the big corporations that are doing that, they're entitled to a return. So there should be a return on that. So you're right. We've got to get the balance right. Sometimes just giving money to householders isn't the best answer, and that's why I want to come up with this 10-point plan that really identifies what's the low-hanging fruit, what are the things that are a no-brainer to really transition us quickly. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Do you have any insight in how the current or the new Liberal government is going to behave in New South Wales under, let's suppose, a Labor government in February after May?
So last time I was here, I was talking about our summit that was coming up the following couple of days at Near Casino there, and a number of you came along to that, right? Came along to the thing where Malcolm Turnbull spoke, and we had Don Harwin, the Energy Minister, at that event. And, you know, it was a bit unfortunate because he came in straight after Simon Holmes à Court, who had just put up a compelling factual case as to why New South Wales was so far behind, and then he tried to defend and say that New South Wales was leading the world. So that was a little bit difficult. But following that, he actually made the most positive remarks I've ever heard from him about renewables. Now, was it that they were trying to differentiate between themselves and the federal coalition? Or do they really feel this? I don't know. I do expect, though, that there will be a change in Energy Minister. I don't necessarily believe that Don Harwin will be the Minister going forward. So I think whoever it is, we need to get in early, we need to engage early, we need to provide expert advice, and if we encourage them to go in the right direction, let's do that. Let's definitely do that.
Why do you think Don Harwin is not going to...
Just look, I don't have any inside scoop or anything. It's just a sense that I get by looking at the dynamics of it and talking to the people involved. Yeah.
Do you know anything about those flexible panels, how they deal with the different outputs from themselves, given that it's a different orientation?
It's a very good
How
question.
do they handle that?
I don't. But the company, the Zingron Shi company that are actually based here, they're based in North Sydney.
What's his name?
So his name is Zhengrong Shi. I'll get you the company name and I'll put them in touch, Nick. You might want them to come along and give a talk, you know. So
Sounds good.
if it's interesting, yeah. So,
Do you know anything about any details about the Labor's energy policy? Because I looked at their website and they're all for truisms.
so federal Labor.
They don't say we will do this or spend this much money on this.
Yeah, sure. So probably the centrepiece that they've announced so far is a target of 1 million batteries by 2025 and a $2,000 rebate for the first 100,000 batteries that go out. So that's their first, and we expect that program, if they are elected, to come into effect from the 1st of January 2020.
What about larger scale? Again, this is a
So, sure. And again, I haven't got a comprehensive list here, so I'm going from memory, but $10 billion being invested through the Clean Energy Finance Corporation to invest specifically in transmission upgrades. So a lot of projects at the moment are not getting connection approval because the transmission lines just are not up to it, basically. So $10 billion is what's being pledged to CFC for that particular problem. I'm expecting more announcements to come, and as the campaign rolls out, we'll get a better idea.
So it seems to be just saying we've got these targets, but how they're going to get there seems to be very scant information.
And don't get me wrong, you know, I think that whoever's in government, it's incumbent on us to push them to go further, you know. So I think it might be a starting point for what Labor's talking about, and it'll be a big change from where we are today, but I wouldn't be complacent about Labor, and I think we'd need to keep working on them, so.
And it's better in mind in terms of pushing in your negotiations and on a partner work basis. You also have to talk to the independents because apparently they've been in the press even today that they're concerned with the transition away from coal. And if we're lucky, the non-government coalition is actually going to get 47 seats. There's still one seat still available, which means you're only one by-election away from having numbers that they don't have to negotiate. So their key awareness is to push renewables.
So you might remember in 2011, Barry O'Farrell sought to retrospectively tear up the feed-in tariff contracts with the people of New South Wales, right? That's what he did. Sorry?
He had a right on his hands.
Yeah, he had a right in his hands, and I was the right leader, right? And we got into the Parliament in 2011, and we worked specifically with the crossbenchers. So I spent time with the shooters and fishers. I spent time with the Fred Nile Party, for example, with the Greens, you know, with other small minor parties, to ensure the numbers so that we could defeat that. And we were successful in doing it. So I think you definitely have to engage at that level. In the federal government, it was the crossbenchers, people like in the Palmer United Party, surprisingly, right, that actually saved Arena and CEFC. And I remember standing with Dio Wong as he went from his office to the chamber to vote, just to make sure he didn't change his mind in between, because it came down to one vote, right? And so that's what you've got to do, you know, to kind of do that. So we're very alert to the numbers, and we'll come up with a strategy accordingly. Yep, absolutely.
You were asked what would happen to the state plan if a Labor government came to federal. What will happen to the state plan if a Liberal government comes in?
Well, I slip my wrists and we go home. Like it has been diabolical, right? It is the stupidity of it knows no bounds, you know. And one thing I would say is, don't be complacent. You know, the New South Wales election result shows. Now, there were other things that happened in the last week, and it was a disaster and a whole bunch of other things. But if climate change really is a top 5 issue, which is what the polling was saying before the election, it didn't have any impact at all. Like, I didn't see the impact of that, you know. So what I would say is, do not be complacent about this stuff. This really matters, and I think we just can't afford not to win. We have to win, you know.
I was a scrutineer the other night, and what surprised me was the young people who were voting. When you looked at where their preferences went to, it went to the Liberals.
I think
They went to the Greens, but also like the Open City people. A lot of them were going to the Liberals.
you know, I actually think that there's a distinct lack of political education for young people. I think they come of voting age. There's not a framework or a process for them, and they say
30 down.
Yeah, and they say, I'm going to vote like my parents vote, you know, and they kind of just, it's like a football team, you know.
No, but when they vote for some of these independent, smaller sites,
they come back to Liberal as number 2. I understand.
Properly.
Yeah, that's right. They don't understand.
The way we would like.
That's right. You've got to put it last, right? Put them last, you know. Yeah, no, I agree.
You see, also they can only just put one now. So
Right.
Their vote dies.
Optional preferential voting, that's right, makes it complicated. So just while I'm on the chain of thought, one of the presenters at our webinar recently was Amanda McKenzie. Now, Amanda founded the Australian Youth Climate Coalition, so the group of young people who are really passionate about the climate. She actually, when she turned 25, she couldn't be a member anymore because she was no longer young enough, right? She's now a young mother. And she said that her daughter will be starting high school, so starting year 7 in the year 2032. This is not some distant future that we all think, you know, is about flying cars and the Jetsons. It's like in about 3.5 seconds' time, you know. This is the decade where we have to act. If we do not act in this decade, we are stuffed. And so we've got some work to do. Yeah, sorry.
So one of the big point in terms of the numbers is how many votes. Hang this is the final result. And my suspicion is if you were to add up, you could do it 2 ways. 2-party prefer with the absolute votes. You'll probably get more votes for the combination of Labor, the Greens, Animal Justice Party, State Australia, the sort of groups that probably almost certainly have policies supporting renewable energy. So that should be a powerful argument against those that want to act, because it happens that our system, flawed as it is, with return to coalition government, that you could argue that those are the people who really want parties that will apply.
I'm not trying to be controversial here, right? The massacre in New Zealand is a tragedy of epic proportions, right? That is just diabolical, right? And can't be compared to anything in any way. But I will say that there was another footnote that it did. On that same day, young people around the country rallied in every capital city in the country, and they made a huge ruckus and guffaw, and it was completely obliterated. Nobody knows that it happened, you know, because some arsehole went and bloody murdered 50 people. So, you know, but we can't stop, right? Let's go again. Let's go again. You know, and well, at least we're having a discussion about some of those things, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Sorry, there were a couple of other people who had their hands up.
If you could elaborate at all on the $20 million to the emerging energy program with the private sector, do you know any more detail?
I don't, but we can easily find out detail and put you in with the right people. I'll give you a business card at the end of this. Please reach out, and I'll put you in touch. We have a full-time government relations manager, Wayne Smith. He's fantastic, so he'll help you with that straight away. Yep.
often in my world of government, energy and so water and waste are seen as all cousins of the energy play. Solar hot water and heat pump hot water. I mean, I've been in this space for 20 years and the price essentially hasn't changed in 20 years. Is there anything in the wings that might indicate a shift? Notwithstanding your comment before about direct solar versus solar thermal, a good, competent solar thermal hot water system is a pretty effective way to provide energy to go with hot water to home.
Yep.
Is there any movement in that space? I mean, basically, for those of you who are in that space, essentially you're looking at $5,000 for a solar water system, and you're looking at $5,000 for the last 10 years. And $5,000 10 years ago got you 2 kilowatts of PV, and now it gets you almost 5 kilowatts of PV.
That's right.
It's just in your insights.
So the problem with hot water is this. Your hot water has gone when you're standing in the shower and suddenly the water goes cold, right? You say, crap, the hot water system's gone, right? And then you're like, I've got to get hot water on by tonight, right? So then you call up someone and say, look, yeah, I can sell you an electric hot water thing. It'll be $1,200 fully installed, right? Or I can sell you a solar hot water thing, it's $5,000. Like, well, I don't have a lazy $5,000 sitting in my sock drawer every second day so that when the hot water thing turns out. So people just go on the sticker price, right? And they go, I don't have that, I got $1,200, put an electric one in, And so that's really hard to counter that, to talk about the value long term. Maybe what we need is low interest loans for hot water systems. But I'm just hoping that the price drop of solar's been so dramatic that PV driven hot water can start to make a dent. That's what I'm hoping. Sorry, just another footnote on that. We do have a new entrant into the market. It's a Japanese heat pump system. It's the most efficient in the world, and it's going through the CTIC or the watermark approvals now in Australia, and it's on show at the conference and exhibition. So I think I don't want to say how many stars or whatever because I'm not an expert, but.
And there is already a Japanese product on the market. It's a very good product. But that's what I'm thinking at. It's not just the new home.
Yeah.
But with the evacuated tube technology and Chinese mass production, I'm almost surprised that the $2,000 Chinese model is not already in the market. What's happening there?
Look, I think one of the tendencies of Australian industry, look, and this is just a personal comment, right, is that companies do use standards as a barrier to keep other players out. So they're actually inside the standards making bodies, they come up with a standard and have to comply with the standard, and so so they set the bars in a exclusionary way as opposed to a customer protection sort of.
And justifiably so, because I recall 8-10 years ago there were numerous solar or models that came onto the market that were clearly subsidised. And
we don't want leaking, dodgy, evacuated tubes on people's roofs. That's absolutely right. So it's finding the balance, but yeah. Okay.